Hi everyone! Welcome back to another episode of Starting Out, a podcast where we share our stories of starting out in this great big world. We talk about our highlights, trials and tribulations, and lessons we've learned along the way. So, as you are starting your journey, we hope you can learn from us. So, Cor, what's the topic for today?
Our topic for today is actually a question that we're asking our listeners. Is it really the end of the world if you don't find your soulmate in school? But we're going to be talking about dating and relationships in high school, the transition to university or college, and some things that we observed, some positive and negative relationship habits that developed throughout that time, and the pressure that we, and I'm sure others, have felt during our time there. Then, as always, we'll be ending off with a big picture moment and key takeaways for our listeners. So, Neeqs, let's begin in high school. From your perspective, what are some things that you saw in high school in terms of relationships and dating?
Yeah, high school is a funny place. And I think what we saw in high school was a lot of people just dated because of like familiarity. You know the person, you grew up with them, you probably know where their parents work because you go eat at their sandwich shop, been with them since like elementary school or high school. I feel like a lot of people were settling for that sense of familiarity rather than like actual compatibility, because when you come down to it, like there's only so many people you can date in high school in like your cohort. So think about like you're like, oh, high school, it's like, okay, if a senior is dating a freshman, it's like that's sketchy. But more so like if you were dating within your own class, yeah, I feel like there's like almost also like a pressure at the very end of high school, which is so strange. Think about it, but it is a pressure. Who are you gonna bring to prom? And oh my god, the amount of people that just
Yeah.
started like dating like out of nowhere. And it's like prom king and queen, where you're going into these relationships and you're like, oh my god, this is like a performance of how much we love each other and how compatible, and like you better vote for us. So
Yeah. A performance. I love that word,
it's all a
performance.
performance. So I think what we're trying to say here is if you have like this like, oh, I didn't marry my high school sweetheart, or I didn't find my high school sweetheart,
It will be
yeah,
fine.
it probably like at most 99.9% will be gonna be
Yeah.
fine. People start saying like weird things like, do you love me? Are we gonna like ride it through, and like we're not gonna be part of the turkey dump, like blah blah blah. It's like it's not that serious.
Yeah, or if like two couples would like try to pick to go to the same school or the same university and college too, or like when one person would base their decision off of what little Jimmy decides to go, like your example, Jimmy's going to Conestoga while I'm going to
We love
Conestoga.
that. Yeah. So the world is gonna get a little bit bigger, and we finally went to university. You tell me about all the crazy things that we saw.
Like you used to live at your parents' house. You never go out at 2 a.m. You would never answer a booty call at 3 a.m. Be like, yep, bye mom and dad, I'm leaving. They'd be like, what the fuck? No, we're not letting you out of the house. What some of the things that I guess both of us observed in when we were in university was, first of all, we really start seeing people come into their sexuality and really start opening up their eyes, their mind to what is out there. And essentially, I feel like a lot of people are a lot more, it's not frowned upon to like hook up anymore, I'd say, because like that's what the culture is in first year. I remember a lot of people had dating apps such as Tinder, Hinge, whatever it may be, because it's like a whole new world, a whole new environment.
If you're like anything remote of like outside of your province or like your state, you're just like, oh my god, you're so different.
Yeah, I remember that where it's like when you meet someone and it's like they say like a random city like 2 hours outside of Toronto or like anywhere that's big name, they're like, oh, he foreign. Like, no, not
Not
really.
really.
We also saw some funky stuff. We saw, which we will also talk about later, but we saw people like 19 or 18-year-olds dating 35 to 40-year-old men. It's like that weird relationship dynamic where it's like, I never comprehended in first year. I'm like,
Yeah, it's just like that wide spectrum it really just opens the door so wide. If you're from like a close knit community and you're going into such a big space and you get to see a whole bunch of different things, yeah, I feel like it gets a little shocking. I thought it was a little shocking. I was like, I thought this happened in movies, but I guess it's happening here, right here in
I think another thing that I saw was also a lot of long distance relationships as well. It almost be like a point to bring. Oh, I have a girlfriend. It's like she doesn't go here.
she doesn't even live on this universe. I take 7 train rides and a space rocket to Mars to see her. Because that's how I honestly felt. Because like no one could drive at that point. Like everybody had their boo thing from high school. That's another thing. I think one of the biggest things for me was being comfortable with everybody's choices. I think some things I would have never understood or been like, oh my God, I've been taught to judge. You were actually very good dealing with all this change and having seen all these different things. You have a great story about that.
Yes, I actually do. I guess it just comes to the point that a lot of people are in a little bit of shock and even disbelief
Yeah.
with like the amount of options, like you said. So, specifically in my case, my first year roommate, she was very close with her parents.
Mm-hmm.
So, when she was in high school, she wasn't allowed to date, she wasn't allowed to bring a boyfriend or just any boys home to her place without her parents' approval. So you can imagine coming from an environment where you're like so sheltered from your parents and their rules that when you transition to university or college, it's like you get a lot more freedom and the chance to explore and kind of almost like rebel against your parents because they're not there. So that's what happened with my roommate. There were a couple nights, but I remember one night specifically where she got like a 2 a.m. booty call saying like the typical "you up" text with like the winky face.
Yep.
And it's so interesting that her first reaction to this was she turned to me, she's like, "Can I go?" And I'm like, well, yes, like, you know, if you want to enjoy your time, like for sure go, but like you don't have to ask me. But I think just like the initial reaction of being like, oh, I need someone's approval first before I go. I think that's very interesting because it could see that like you still take some of like your previous tendencies of that you had in high school
Mm-hmm.
and then you bring it into first year university.
So live your best life and have fun. Be safe. And that you always text a friend or you like let people know where you are. Just because there is options doesn't mean that everything you do is going to be the greatest thing ever. And in those starting out moments, there were some times that things didn't go so well. We just noticed or have experienced ourselves some stuff that made relationships very negative or thought, this is not really like a great thing to do. Let's talk about being attached to the hip because we all know that couple that were like, she takes one sip of water, I take a sip of water.
Yeah. It's like the saying where like when you start dating too long, you start becoming and fusing into one person.
Yes.
So you'd have like the same personality, same behavior, same way of talking, and it's like, whoa, you two are the same exact person, and it's so weird.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of that, I remember in first year, my boyfriend and I had a little bit of problem just because we had a hard time coping and dealing with the transition from high school to university.
Mm-hmm.
We felt that we never had enough independent time and like we were never on the same page in terms of more of the social aspect of university just because he wanted to study more but I wanted to go out and explore and like meet new friends. So obviously there was a lot of clash there, but I think ultimately what I learned from that experience is that it's more so on my end that I felt like I shouldn't be dragging and forcing or even like you shouldn't be forcing your significant other and vice versa to do something that they may not necessarily be interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And even though I totally understand it's like you want to share the experience with the other person to have like that special moment in your relationship, like I feel that like sometimes it is good to like share a really special moment with your significant other, but other times it's also completely okay that both of you enjoy doing your passion and interest in something separate,
Mm-hmm.
but then you guys could both come together again and then share what that experience was as opposed to actually like going through it together because it's almost like the specialty aspect of it is gone.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's not much to talk about because you both saw the same thing, right? And you
Yeah.
both experienced the same thing. And I think we're a lot better at this now, whereby we both really enjoy each other's company,
Hmm.
but then at the same time, we're both completely fine with doing whatever our interests are and not doing it together.
Hmm. It's like maintaining a sense of self. I can only imagine too, because like when you're starting out in university, it's like really hard because you don't know anybody. And I've seen this too, where it's like the comfort of just knowing somebody very well at a party and not being alone. It's almost like it can be like over leaning on each
Yeah,
other or overdoing it a little bit.
100%. Yeah, that's exactly how I felt. It was like the feeling of like over depending on that
That's what it
person to be
was.
like your safe net,
Yes.
to be like your safety. I remember in first year, it was just nerve wracking to go to a party that you knew nobody,
Mm-hmm.
but just that safety and that over dependence. Like, oh yeah, I'm always gonna have my boyfriend or girlfriend or significant other beside me at the party.
Yeah.
It's like, well, that's may not necessarily be the case 100% of the times. I think another thing that didn't necessarily go well was we actually saw this quite a lot where in first year, a lot of the times you'd either be living with one other person in the same room, or sometimes like in another residence there were four people in the same room, but it's like a secluded area. I also had a third roommate as well, and actually in first year I just wanted to say I am okay with my roommate like going out and like having fun, exploring her sexuality or whatever. I'm 100% for that because she's having fun, but it got kind of to the point where she would kick me out the day before one of my midterms. I just thought that was a little disrespectful just because first of all, like,
I'm just going to clarify that. That was really disrespectful.
it's just you don't be disrespectful. First of all, I had a midterm like 9 a.m. the next day, and at 2 a.m. she's like, don't come back. I was like, well, there's 7 hours, and if I study for 1 hour, then there'd be 6 hours left, and then I don't know what to do for the next six
Yep.
hours. Second of all, it's like I also pay for the room, you know what I mean? Like,
Hate to break it to
this is
you.
just as much, yeah,
Yep.
this is just as much my space as it is your space. So why is it that like you couldn't have done this any other day? You could do this yesterday, you could do this tomorrow, but why did it have to be the day before my freaking exam? So I just thought that was a little
Mm-hmm.
disrespectful. Just make sure that like you let the other person know.
I just don't understand that sometimes. I'm just like, maybe that's a little bit too much freedom. Speaking of like crossing people's boundaries and stuff, let's talk about the boundaries of roles. I think we saw this a little too often, but this isn't like a normal thing, but some people turn into like people's parents to their significant other.
You know, I think it's like a good thing that I have all these stories because it's very funny to tell people, but it's also a bad thing because I had to experience all of this within first year. Even a bulk of these stories were actually in first year, but some were in second and upper years. I kind of secretly hope that our listeners have like some stories like these to tell other people, to be like, yeah, I lived through some whack ass shit. If I could do it, you could do it. But secretly at the same time, it's like, I hope you never have to
Yeah.
experience this.
We're here to hold your hand, to be like, it's gonna be okay.
Yeah. So this was in second year. So first year, like we said, a lot of undergrad students decides to live on campus in residence. But then afterwards, from second to fourth year, even fifth and sixth year, you start living with a group of your friends. Like we said, in a group of 7, 8, whatever it may be. This was usually how we saw on our campus, but it may be different on other university or college campuses. But in second to fourth year, if you were a couple, we tend to see the couples actually living separate from each other, so not together. So the girls would live with like a group of girls with 7 of them, and then the men would live like with like their bros or whatever it may be, right? It's interesting because I actually knew this one couple that actually lived together. The relationship dynamic was very interesting just because a lot of the things I saw was what I thought someone who was like married for 10 years and lived together for 20 years to have experienced. I essentially saw the girl babying the boy, essentially. So he was kind of like messy in terms of he had this one chair that he'd throw all of his dirty clothes onto, and like even on the floor. He wouldn't do laundry often. For example, when he cooked bacon on the stove top, like the grease would kind of spill onto the stove surface and he wouldn't clean it. And as you know, it dries up and it gets really hard to take off if you wait a day even. She turned into his mom and her reaction was like, "You don't need to do your laundry now. It smells so bad. You need to clean the stove. It's your turn to clean the bathroom." She was so on top of everything that he was doing. It literally felt like that was her son.
That's so crazy. I have a story where there was this girl who was so good at school. Like she was like advanced placement, everything, which is like basically like your highest level of education for or like your highest level of education in a certain subject, right? And then she was like AP everything, honor roll, smartest of the smart. And her boyfriend was like actually struggling. Like it was very honorable on her end to like help him sit down and learn and actually get good grades. I remember they broke up and basically it was like a huge falling out of like went back to his old ways, like totally didn't care about anything and everything, and she was always like, oh my god, my all my hard work is like been washed away. I think this whole podcast is like I'm very interested in understanding where your parental influence comes in and shapes you when you are out on your own, when there's not even a parental figure nearby. I think that's what the most interesting thing about this whole podcast is, what we're trying to discover or like have noticed, especially this one. I'm like, I don't get why we have to play that role so many times. And maybe I do. Like I like yes, we have to like be the mom, like maternal instinct and all that stuff. Like, would a man ever do that to me? Would a man ever sit me down every single day and be like, you really need to study and give me like strong daddy vibe? No, I don't think so. I have never seen something like that.
Yeah, I think what I hear a lot even is if you're a man and like you're attracted to a woman, like and you what you would look for in that woman is like some of the qualities that your mom had and like vice
Yeah.
versa. Even my mom was saying that. We're not here to replace your mom.
Yeah.
That's not what we're not a direct one for one substitution. Like, yeah, mom tag out, girlfriend, you're in.
Yeah, it's a very interesting dynamic. So if I think it's just like be a little bit more cognizant of like what you're dealing with. And it's like university and you're in high school, like you have still so much time. As much as people think that there is no time, which we'll get into in like 1 second. If you don't want to play that role, don't. You're eating away at your own happiness at the end of the day. And let's talk about sharing spaces for one last second is just don't be an asshole when you have a significant other. Like you do, newsflash, you do live with a couple other people, probably. Their needs and wants are just as important as yours and your significant other.
Like, I'm totally fine with like saying, hey, you know what, be straight. If you're, I know you're gonna have sex where it's like, oh, sorry, can you come back in like 30 minutes? Like, I know what that implies, and it's like, yeah, for sure, like you do you. But like Neek said, don't be an asshole. If you know your roommate has a midterm the next day and wants to sleep, be respectful of that and be like accommodating of that. So don't be an asshole. Learn to communicate.
Carrying on, I think.
Do you feel the time
Oh, I
crunch?
do feel the time crunch. Oh my gosh. TikTok.
Your biological clock is ticking
Yeah,
too.
and you know, these are the last 4 years of your life, and then everybody is snatched up, gotten married, and literally you're gonna be tossed to the side. I think that is one of the biggest pressures. There was like this whole thing calling getting your like MRS degree, so your Mrs. degree. It's where you are going to university or college or whatever just to get a man.
And you essentially learn like how to be a housewife in your courses basically.
Yeah. I guess like if you have a significant other, which Cor did have, it's like so much. I think you get a free pass because you're like, okay, you're fine. But like when you don't, it's like I don't know why. Sarah Blakely from Spanx talks about it a lot. And she says like when she goes to like weddings and stuff, everybody's like, someone out, it's like almost like a, I'm gonna pray for you that someone's gonna come and like, scoop you up. Also, it was like kind of interesting because she was building like $1 billion business with a B. And I'm like, I am here for like to better myself and better my education and everything. There was like almost like little to no talk about what you're gonna do for your career, what you're gonna do for your job. Like, newsflash, if I'm gonna have 5 kids, who the fuck are you gonna pay for that? My husband has me earning like a 500K like salary at this point to cover both of our expenses and both of our needs and wants. I have a funny story. So I fell into the trap. Make sure you go hang out with the right circles, or else you need to find a doctor, an engineer, or lawyer. So I was like, okay, I'm single, nothing's happening. So I went to Mingle. So my friend, also I met in university, undergrad, but she fast tracked and she got into a medical school program. Maybe this is also us being bad, but we were always like looking at the roster of like who came in and like who's cute. And usually everybody who's cute literally got cuffed. Everyone's married. So I was like, okay, well, I'll go to this party. And it was a Halloween party. And I'm like, okay, I'll just like see what's up. Oh my God. Literally epic fail. So everybody was cuffed in pairs. Okay. No one
Mm.
breaks from their pair. And I think I talked to somebody who broke from their pair and she gave me like the dirtiest look the whole night. And I was like, sick. Not funny. Life friends here either. Only guy there that was single. And I guess I was the only girl that was single. So I am wearing this like slutty flight attendant outfit, boobs out, everything out. And no wonder everybody was mad at me and trying to protect their significant other's eyes. Not to say I'm hot or anything. So then I'm like chilling, and then this guy also finds out I'm single. He was wearing this like dorky Star Wars outfit. All the couples are on one side of the room. It's just us two on the other side. I'm like, why does this feel so predatory? And I just remembered he was like, I guess like my friend was in the other room, like talking to other people the entire time. And she walks in, and then everyone's like, they're gonna get together. And then she was like, oh, hell no. She was like, oh, no, that's not gonna happen. That's actually not gonna happen. I think she's just trying to be nice and listen to his story.
Oh my god, you could have had yourself a 500K resident doctor, or maybe he would have graduated by now.
Yeah, exactly. I literally was like, should I wear a shirt? And my friend's like, no, you look hot, it's fine. And I'm like, oh, I feel exposed. Everyone's looking at me.
Yeah. I also feel like it's a lot of like nosy aunties and
Yeah.
uncles asking you at like barbecues or like family get togethers on the holidays, like, do you have a boyfriend? Like, that's the first thing they would say. Boyfriend? No boyfriend? Why no boyfriend? Like, what's wrong? I find you boyfriend. And they name like their grandchild.
If you feel the pressure of ever finding your significant other and like people are putting such an emphasis on you, like, let's tell people in the back again, it's gonna be okay. What are some actual healthy things that you saw or like you wish you could have done a little bit earlier to negate some of this bad juju?
So I think one thing that I definitely wish I learned, which I kind of alluded to as well in my stories with my boyfriend, was it definitely was a learning experience, but what I wish I did early on was like start building both emotional and physical boundaries even
Mm,
before we got into first year, which I totally understand. It's really hard just because you don't know what you're in for
yeah.
before you start Frosh Week. So then when you move in and then Frosh Week begins, then you're like, oh my god, there's so many things to do. Do I bring my boyfriend to this? Do I bring my significant other to this? Like, are we gonna hang out 24/7?
Mm-hmm.
We ultimately had the same friend group,
Yeah.
and it's not like we didn't like each other's friends at all.
Mm-hmm.
It's more so like I think it's very important to have like separate friend groups. And even though like it's totally okay for you to like intermingle and like meet the other person and hang out, but it's still really important to like make sure that your significant other has some alone time with his friends and that like you don't kind of intrude on them. But then same for you, right? Like you have your own friends that you hang out with. And then you could go back and be like, "Oh, I saw Susie and this is what we did."
It's so interesting because like your friends who were like babying each other and all that stuff, and some crazy shit. And I again, like I said this before, where it's like a really great exercise to see what kind of things you have taken on from your own parents. We're going to say it for the people in the back one more time. Go to therapy. Sort out some whatever issues you had to make you the way you are. If you're aware of them and you're like, maybe not. Maybe I don't want to be like that. Maybe I don't want to be like this either. Yeah, definitely do that because it follows you. You think this is a one-off instance, but it will follow you for the rest of your life. Things that you don't want, like bad traits and all that stuff, if you don't like them, or if you don't like the cohort of people, or if you don't like what you're meeting or like getting yourself into, it's not permanent. So you can always change.
I think ultimately, like, if you don't find your lifelong partner, it's okay.
It's okay. We're gonna answer our own question. Is it really the end of the world? No, it's not.
Yeah, but you tell us as well. Honestly, in university and college, go and have fun and explore what you're interested in, honestly.
Of course. Yeah, we'll leave it off. Okay, so you're like, okay, this is great. Haha, like, why do I not feel like this? And like, oh my God, everyone's taken and everybody's married. I feel like when you are in university, it becomes your own little bubble. You're gonna realize one more time again when you step out of that and you go into the actual like working world and you start living your life as like not a student anymore, the world becomes a little bit bigger again and it becomes a little bit more mysterious. There's just a lot more opportunities. So if you're like down in the dumps and you just graduated and you're like, oh my God, COVID, everything has gotten me down and nothing, no one will ever come out again. And I wasted all my years of my youth. We always think opportunities are always presenting themselves. You just have to open up your eyes wide enough to see them. And we hope you are having fun. Wink, wink. Bye.
Bye.
You have just been listening to the Starting Out podcast. If you liked today's episode, please make sure to rate and like the show. Also, leave us a review. It helps us a lot. To never miss an episode, please subscribe and turn on notifications. We love to hear from you. So if you want to chat with us, tweet us at Starting Out Pod. Links are in the description. As always, we are so excited for you to start out on your journey, all while listening to ours. See you in the next one.